Hey guys, good afternoon. So, I'd like to introduce you to my family compost pile, started by my wife. I have a reason for this. So, take a look. We've been working on this for a while. Instead of just throwing this stuff in the regular trash, we have been trying to put it out here so it can biodegrade. So right now you can probably see some flies, rotting fruit at various levels of decomposition. And if you look real closely, you will also see some bird feathers. And that is something I'd like to talk to you about. So let me share a story. I was at work a few days ago. By the way, have a seat with me here. Let's see. There we go. Welcome to my backyard, such as it is. So, story about the bird. I was at work the other day, and my wife FaceTimed me and said, "Hey, you got a minute? You have a minute to talk to our girls about death?" I was like, "Oh, okay." Caught me off guard a little bit. Now, we've mentioned death to our girls from time to time. This was not the first conversation we'd had, but they came upon kind of a unique opportunity to talk about this. And that was they found a bird while they were out, I guess at a park or something. They found a bird that appeared to be very weak, possibly injured, and I don't know if it was here at the house or somewhere nearby, but they brought the bird back. And my wife and the girls took turns holding the bird, and it eventually became apparent that the bird was dying. So this provided an opportunity to talk a little bit to the girls about death. So my wife FaceTimed me. So I'm sitting here on FaceTime trying to think about how to describe it to my daughters. And one thought that came to mind, I told her, well, I was talking mostly to my oldest daughter. She's 5 now. And so I told her it's kind of like, when one of our machines stops working because it doesn't have power anymore, and it doesn't work because it needs more power. Well, that's kind of like what death is that, that body, in this case a bird's body, it doesn't have power anymore. It can't move anymore. It stopped moving. That was, I guess, the most profound thing I could come up with on short notice. It's hard, like when you think about how to talk about death to a 5-year-old. Is this something they're going to encounter? I mean, it could be something as simple as just seeing a dead ant, or killing an ant, and seeing it dead there and no longer moving, to something more complex like a bird, that you see was what was left of the bird after several days of decomposition and various animals and insects taking what they needed from the bird's body. And that's a concept like the cycle of life, like death as it relates to the cycle of life. That's something that I really do want to talk to my kids about on a regular basis. It's something I'm thinking a lot more about myself. There was a meditation put out by the liturgists a while back. It was about water. And it was just this, 10, 15 minute meditation practice thinking about water and how all living things throughout time, on this earth have been connected. Just think about this. Like, I think our bodies are made up of what? 70% water or something like that. There's a lot of water in our bodies, in our cells. Like, each individual cell, as I understand it, has a certain degree of water in it, helps it to maintain its turgidity. I think that's the right word. But just think about that. I may have water in my cells right now that was once drunk from a river by Charlemagne, and maybe that water had flowed, from the Alps, and maybe it had come from the Alps because of rain, and that rain came from a cloud, and the water had evaporated, let's say from, a Mayan citadel in South America, and traveled, I'm just thinking about this and thinking, like, and just for sake of hypothesizing here, imagine that the earth is indeed 4 billion years old, or even if it's just a few 100,000 years old. Just think about, there may have been like a saber-toothed tiger, like there may be some water molecules in my body right now that were once a part of the body of a saber-toothed tiger that lived millions of years ago. Just thinking of the through line of that is kind of mind-blowing. So that meditation just kind of got you thinking about that, just using water as an example. One of the laws of thermodynamics, which, at the end of the day is just something we have observed as humans, it's a working theory, if you will. It seems that matter, what we call matter, is neither, as best we can tell, neither created nor destroyed, but it is transformed. So if I were walking up in the mountains by myself, and this is a little macabre, but like if I had a heart attack and died right there in the mountains, I'm up there and nobody found my body, I'm up there far away, and my body were to decompose normally, like it didn't get buried, it didn't get embalmed, it's just laying there. So let's say a bobcat or a mountain lion were to come along and discover it, shortly after my death. They would probably eat. Like, I have pretty big leg muscles, so they might start there first. I have a nice big butt. My gluteus maximus muscles are good sized, so that would provide quite a bit of meat for, say, a mountain lion or a bobcat or a coyote. So in that sense, my death would give life to another animal. Probably many animals, would come and partake of that. Maybe a raccoon might get in on it, or a vulture, what have you. Just different scavengers that may come upon my corpse. But also, you have all the microorganisms like the bacteria that would be breaking things down, and then you have small insects, flies, ants. So over time, like what didn't get eaten by a bigger predator would be eaten by much smaller predators, if you will, and their excretions would eventually go back into the soil, and then that would provide life for the plants growing in that area, which would then be eaten by herbivores, maybe a deer, and that deer would later be eaten by the mountain lion, or perhaps it might get shot by a hunter and then provide, venison for like 6 months to this family of humans. So then, in death, my physical body, at least, could provide life, literally, potentially, to thousands and thousands of organisms. And this is the cycle of life, right? As far as this material world that we can touch and taste, like, I've got some chickpea snacks, so technically this plant had to die. Well, maybe not. I'm not exactly sure how chickpeas are harvested, but they had to be detached. Maybe that's not a good example, but for me to live, many, 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 many organisms have had to die throughout my almost 40 years of life. So that
Daddy?
Hey kiddo, I'm recording my video. Can you go back inside?
I'm in my window.
I know. We have a second story window, so my kid's up there. Hey Emma, can you close the window please so I can keep talking? Thank you. So, that was the kid in question that I was talking to about death earlier in the week. And here's another mind-blowing thought, like reproduction, right? Part of me and part of my wife is in her. Even if that's just our chromosomes and our genetic material, part of me and more, I would say, probably of my wife, is in her body, literally. And that's not even talking about the cultural transmission, if you will, the culture of our home, like the lessons we have taught her, both just by being around her and her observing us and imitating our behavior and learning how to do things as simple, things like eating and drinking, some of which come built in with like instincts, genetic memory, stuff like that. I don't know how all that, the science, it's fascinating. I want to learn more about it, but like some of that, you think about that, like some of those abilities, some of that knowledge comes built in, like when a human is born, it's already there. And in other cases, just the capacity for learning is already there. So then all the inputs that she has, whether it be from me and my wife, which we are the primary inputs for her. Now she has two sisters that are also inputting, television shows that we watch, books that we read to her, friends that she interacts with, etc., etc. Like there's so much cultural input like that, which is actually stored, physically stored in her brain and in her nervous system, and like the body's capacity for learning is fascinating. And that cycles down, like those, like knowledge is passed down, genetic material is passed down, one plant or animal dies so that I can have life today. Like water, strictly speaking, like pure H2O is abiotic. It's not what we consider alive, but without it I would die. Same with oxygen, O2, I should say the oxygen mix that's in the atmosphere. It's not pure O2. Oxygen and then nitrogen, and even much of that. Like think about the cycle of life there. That the here, I'm gonna turn around for it. So these trees, right now, they are giving off oxygen, which is giving me life, and I am exhaling carbon dioxide, which I don't know fully, to what extent that nourishes the trees, but I know that they absorb that CO2 and they use it for something and are able to convert it in some amazing way to oxygen. It's just fascinating, right? So circling back around to death. There are so, like, the more I study the stories that we humans tell, the more I read of our stories, the ancient stories, you know, like we have writing going back like 5,000 years, which, you know, if indeed the Earth is 4 billion years old, if indeed Homo sapiens have been around for 200,000 years, as many scientists say, 5,000 years is a drop in the bucket, if you will. So it's not much of our history, but it feels like a lot for us because your average human now, and at least in America and in a developed country, might live 80 years. So compared to 5,000, so it still feels like a lot. But even just looking at that, the written records we have, we humans love telling stories, and we tell stories about death and birth and life and the cycle of life. We speculate about what may come after death. You know, is there some part of me or you as a human that will continue on in an identifiable way after our death? Like, is there something of me, Richard, in a way that I will be conscious of that is going to continue on after this physical body ceases to function? You know, empirically, my answer to that is I don't know. But I think it's something worth thinking about, and you just looking down through history and looking down at the stories that we tell and the beliefs that we hold to about the afterlife. I've been exploring Buddhism just a little bit over the last year, just off and on, and as the story goes, as the Buddha was, I think this is coming from the book After Buddhism by Stephen Batchelor. Early on, when the Buddha was forming his own philosophy, he was exploring, you know, some of the current beliefs. There were, I guess, this is a crude term, but sages for hire. There were people who were making a living as philosophers, more or less, like, and they would, each one would promote a different view, like, you know, and the Dharma, the way, the Logos, the truth, God, the nature of the universe. Use whatever synonym you want, but they would say, well, the Dharma is this, you know, the true nature of all things is this, the nature of the universe is this. No, I think it's that. And there were different opinions, and the Buddha, you know, this is Gautama Buddha, noticed that many of these people, they would cling so tightly to their own perspective. Like, hey, no, it's this way. No, it's that way. And, you know, some would say, you know, I believe this was in Nepal, kind of northern India, Nepal region. You would say, you know, their equivalent of the soul, like, yes, the soul continues after death. And another teacher would say, no, the soul doesn't continue after death. And another teacher would say, the soul both does and does not continue after death. And they're just all arguing about it and presenting their different viewpoints. And the Buddha's like, I don't want to hold tightly to any of this. I want to find, in a sense, he's saying, I want to find value in all of these stories and contemplate them and say, the one who says there is life after death, yes, you are right. The one who says there is no life after death, yes, you are right. And on the surface, that may seem like a cop-out, but, you know, if you're looking at it reductively, that can seem like a cop-out. But if you think about it, so let's jump in with this. What is the self? If any of you follow Michael Gungor on Twitter, he asked this. He raised this topic He does from time to time, but he raised it again on Twitter recently and had some really profound statements about it. But think about that question, like, what is the self? What I call me, Richard. What is that? Looking at it from I guess what you might call a Orthodox Christian perspective, is say, well, the true essence of me is my soul, the part of me that is eternal, the part of me that lives forever, the part of me that communes with God. And that soul is my body is really just a vessel. It is essentially a vessel for my soul, but my soul is the truest essence of what I am. Aristotle taught something similar, that the soul and the body are, in a sense, separate entities, and like while you're living on this plane of existence, the two are united in some sense, or the body is like a vessel for the soul, and the soul is attached to the body, but when the body dies, the soul is freed. It's this idea of like pure logic and reason, and perhaps emotion, like floating out there in the ether, detached from this physical form. And that's the part of you. Now, Christianity also teaches that at the end of time, that those two separate entities will be brought back together, that you'll have a new body in which your soul comes back and in some mysterious way comes back to that body, and then the two then, from that point on, as I understand it, I'm trying to generalize the Orthodox position, but the body and the soul then come back together, and then they dwell in that state for the rest of eternity. So then you're given an eternal body and an eternal soul, and the two live together. But in the interim, like before that final resurrection, if you will, if this physical form dies, my soul leaves and either goes straight up to heaven where Jesus is, or if I'm like an enemy of Jesus, if I've rejected Jesus, if you will, or just were ignorant of whatever, I'm not one of his, it goes to some mysterious holding place, maybe Hades, Gehenna, something like that, until the final resurrection, when be given an eternal body and that soul is reunited, and then those that are not written in Jesus' book of life will then be cast into the lake of fire, the book of Revelation says, where it seems to imply they will be tormented day and night forever. So that's kind of the Christian perspective, and that would at least be called a dichotomous view, like the soul and the body. Some put a third one in there, soul, spirit, and body. So trichotomous view. I'm not going to get too deep into that. But there's other ways to look at that. One of the things Michael talks about, and there's others I've heard talk about this as well, is that there's a sense in which the self, what you perceive as the self right now, is a story that you are telling. Like, I've only got like 2 minutes, so I don't know how to get into that. But you just think about the through line. You think about how at one point what I perceived to be myself, Richard, did not exist in this form until I was born. Almost 40 years ago, I was born. So myself, my consciousness, what I call myself, came into existence essentially. But all the genetic materials, the matter and the energy that came into making up my body, they didn't spontaneously generate when I was born. No, they all came from my parents' bodies, which came from from other organisms that they had ingested, and just like this, and it's so interconnected. There's not even words for it. It just boggles my mind just how interconnected it is, and the through line. And again, that's not even talking about the cultural through line and all the ideas and the teaching that has been transmitted by humans over the millennia that have come down to make me who I am now. It's mind-boggling. So it's like, it's so much bigger than just me, the ego, the self. Like, it's so much bigger. It's so interconnected. And when I get a hold of that, when I'm really here in this moment and I'm thinking about how everything is all interconnected, and this is just speculation on my part, but maybe that's what God is. Maybe God is the universe itself. Maybe the universe itself is the body of God, if you will, and every, what you might call, and like the body of God is a complex organism. And maybe that's the way in which we are made in the image of God. Not as these reductionist, separate organisms, but again, it's hard to find words for it. But I am a complex organism. What I call me, Richard, like I do have physical parameters. Like I have my skeletal structure, I have my skin, which covers my muscles, which, keeps my organs inside, and I have an internal circulatory system and a nervous system, so it's an enclosed system in a sense, but not entirely, because it's not closed off from the rest of the world. Like, and again, I'm probably displaying my ignorance of biology, but I'm breathing in air, so I'm taking in the gases around me. I'm not totally sure to what extent my skin can take in air and water and things like that, but I know that those cells do have, and most of our body cells do have semi-permeable membranes. So there are certain things that can't get through those membranes, but there's things like water, oxygen, etc. that can. And you think about, like, I'm eating, like I have the act of eating, these chickpeas. So I'm eating this, but then my body breaks it down into ever more smaller molecules, atoms, whatever, breaks it eventually down into glucose and then adenosine triphosphate, and the water I take in, like my cells end up drinking some of that through phagocytosis, and then they can eat things through phagocytosis, and like and each cell has its own like generator. What do they call it? Mitochondria, the generator of the cell, if you will, that gets energy from the food, and like I believe it breaks it all the way down to like the ATP and the ADP, and that fuels the mitochondria, which fuels the cell. It's a complex organism, right? And so what if me, what I call me, Richard, what if I'm just like a cell in the body of God, and every other discrete organism, if you will, is like another cell in the body of God, all making up, even to as big, making up a bigger organism, which then is part of a bigger organism, which is part of a bigger organism, solar system, then you get to the galaxy, then you get, and on and on and on you go. And what if it's all interconnected, and what if there's the capacity for information to travel all throughout that entire enclosed system? And what if there's more than one out there? Maybe we're a part of this one, this universe. Maybe there's other universes, other enclosed systems, other gods, if you will, and we're all... I could go on and on down a bunch of rabbit holes. But suffice to say, like, thinking about all of that, thinking about my life, what I call my life, myself, and how interconnected I am with the rest of the universe, just blows my mind, and it is slowly transforming the way I think about death. And I'm actually less frightened of it than I used to be. Some would say that's a bad thing. I don't know if it's bad or good, but it's what is right now. I don't know. I'm just putting it out there, food for thought. Take it or leave it, learn from it, reject it, do what you will. I'm just sharing myself with the world. So with that, I'm gonna close up for this week. Cheers to you with my green tea in my favorite mug. I hope you have a wonderful week. By the way, please, if you can, take a moment to like or dislike or comment. I would love to get feedback, love to start some awesome conversations about topics like this, and subscribe. You can follow me on Instagram or Twitter as well, and I have an Empathic Ecologist blog. All 3 links are on my YouTube channel, and you'll see the little links up there in the banner heading, so you can click on that and it'll take you to my social media sites. And with that, I'm gonna say have a good week.